Two things I want to focus on. Total Daily Energy Expenditure, or TDEE. This is the number of calories that we burn during a day. And then we'll talk about a deficit and what being in a deficit relative to that healthy number does to our metabolism. Four things generally make up our total daily energy expenditure. We usually think of movement as being the biggest driver of our calorie burn. Certainly with exercise, we lift weights, we make lots of noise, we get our heart rate up and we sweat. So we think maybe that's this big one down here. It's actually only about 10 to 15% of our burn in general. Other movement, fidgeting, pacing, walking, this kind of thing, makes up a reasonable amount. It's called NEAT, that stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So it's the heat raised by other movements, it's not exercise. That varies. It's usually more than exercise because it happens all day. Not true for everyone, but for most people. The little one, TEF, that's your thermic effect of feeding, the calorie cost of digestion. So each thing that you eat, you have to burn some calories digesting that food. The big one is everything that goes on in the background all the time. When we're exercising, when we're fidgeting, when we're digesting, when we're sleeping, that's organ function, immune function, keeping our breathing normal, all those kinds of things. It's a resting metabolic rate, and it makes up 50, 60, sometimes more % of our burn. So exercise then, if we think it makes such a big effect on our output and it doesn't, what does that mean? Well, it's super important, obviously, for health. I'm not going to get into any of that. I want this to be short. But the other big thing it does is it increases muscle, and muscle has a higher burn than fat. So it still is increasing to our burn. It also, we burn more calories after we exercise than if we hadn't exercised during that time, during that post time. What do these numbers look like? What's a healthy number for you? I came up with two random people, two made up folks, a female and a male. Let's say they're both 20 years old. The female's 5'4", the guy's 6 feet, so average-ish. I'm not sure what average actually is. Put her at 145 pounds, him at 210, 30%, 20%. So not super lean, but moderately healthy. And they're working out. Let's say they're doing 3 to 4 workouts a week, 3 to 4 CrossFit workouts. We'll start with the guy. His healthy burn, if he's eating an adequate amount to support his activity, is about 3,200 calories a day. It's a lot of food. For the gal, we tend to always assume, for some reason, no matter her age, activity level, or anything else, it should be about 1,200 calories. It's kind of the big internet myth that women should eat 1,200 calories. Her healthy burn is actually 2,200, higher than most people think. So what happens? We're going to take her as an example. Her body's happy at 2,250, but she's eating 1,200. That's a 1,000 calorie deficit. She should be dropping fat, melting off her body. But maybe that happened at first, but for the most part right now, fat loss has stalled. This can happen for men too, just focusing on the gal because it's more common. Why? Why does this happen? Why does this fat loss stop? I like to use temperature as an analogy. It's not a perfect analogy, but when our body wants to stay there, so it works hard to stay there. If we get too hot, we sweat. If we're too cold, we're chilled, and all kinds of other things happen to keep that temperature the same. Your body doesn't like this 1,000 calorie deficit, so it's going to drop your burn to reduce that deficit. Maybe you'll fidget less, you'll pace less. Those things are usually unconscious. We don't decide to do those. Digestion might get sluggish. You might have compromised immune function. Maybe you get sick more. Compromised thyroid function. Sleep patterns get messed up. Muscle gets degraded a bit. All of these things obviously are negative. And this 22 comes down, so now our deficit is much smaller. And that's a big part of the reason that fat loss stalls. So what do we do here? We can drive it lower. We can get even lower than 1,200. What's going to happen then? All of this is going to suffer even more. We might get some more fat loss, but the price is high. So what we're gonna do, in many cases, not with everyone, many cases, we're gonna come up a little bit. Not necessarily to this 2250, and that might not be the number for you, it's the number for this random person. That's why we wanted to know where you are now. We had you log for a bit. We're gonna bump you up a little bit. Wait, bump you up a little bit more, maybe a third time. And we're gonna get this stuff humming. Then, when we drop, we'll have a nice deficit for a while. We'll cycle back up. Many times on the way up, people lose fat. And that's great. And hopefully that will happen. Either way, you're not going to gain fat. We're gonna go nice and slow, and this is where your body wants to be. It's gonna be a healthy increase of metabolic rate, getting us ready for some fat loss down the road.